The expansion of Chick-fil-A, one of the most popular fast food restaurants in America, feels like a creepy infiltration of New York City, at least according to the New Yorker's Dan Piepenbring. Why? Because of the company's traditional Christian values. His basic implication is that Chick-fil-A offers a cult-like fast food experience and that its arrival in New York symbolizes the spread of religious-driven bigotry. We are all too familiar with this development of hostility towards Christian values in Western culture, and it is reflecting in America's religious landscape. Between 2007 and 2014, the Christian share of the population fell by roughly 8%, with the trend continuing in recent years. Hollywood's assault on Christianity has been prominent since the late 1970s, and as John Angerberg puts it, is only slightly more benevolent than Al-Qaeda's attitude towards the Jews. Modern film quality is, in my opinion, no less than exceptional, but it has naturally adopted anti-religious elements common to the Hollywood left. And although there are plenty of movies and television that don't directly exhibit an anti-religious message, we often see radically progressive themes including sexual liberation, the cult of self, and militant secularism. Hollywood is, after all, a business. Its goal is to make a profit. It is not obligated to truth, fairness, or a non-biased viewpoint. And although wielding the tool of mass influence, they are hardly to blame for this collective shift in attitude towards religion. Mainstream media has been adopting this anti-Christian attitude as well, from referring to Christian organizations as hate groups to implying that anyone who believes in God has a mental illness.
I don't know if I want that. It's one thing to talk to Jesus. It's another thing when Jesus talks to you.
Exactly. Okay, well, that's different. That's different.
That's called mental illness, if I'm not correct.
But I think
hearing voices.
Time's description of this phenomenon as an insidious intolerance for religion that has no place in a country founded on religious freedom seems like an accurate one. Any far-left journalist or college professor, however, would be more than happy to argue that the foundation of America on Christianity is a myth. These so-called academics are likely to cite one of 2 points. First, that America can't have a Christian founding because it would have resulted in a theocracy as opposed to a democracy. Alternatively, as the Huffington Post argues, because the founders made a limited reference to God or a higher power, it is therefore not derived from any religious influence. As the Post writes, anyone who ignorantly insists that our nation is founded on Christian ideals need only look at the 4 most important documents from our early history to disprove that ridiculous religious bias. Actually, all those documents prove is that our founders sought to avoid the establishment of a theocracy because they knew that freedom of religion was essential to any fair and equal society. This doesn't change the fact that 99.9% of the early American population was Christian, and it certainly doesn't disprove that the establishment of our long-standing laws were heavily influenced by their religious dispositions. This also shows that the founders knew and acknowledged the potential for religious corruption. One of the greatest dangers to any society is the pursuit of religious purity, and through the establishment of a secular democracy, they were careful to avoid it. America may not itself be a Christian country, but the role Christianity played in founding the country and developing modern principles is a big one. Jim Jones, the mastermind behind the largest psychological massacre in modern Western history, was the head of the People's Temple, a church in the Disciples of Christ denomination. Jones used his religious influence to incite hundreds of his own people, women and children, to poison themselves via cyanide ingestion. The Jonestown Massacre demonstrates the potential for people to use others' susceptibility to spirituality in malicious ways, and Jim Jones did so by misinterpreting religious doctrine to falsely promote collectivism as the only moral ideology. But this brings up another important element of Christianity: individualism. Contrary to popular belief, Jesus wasn't a communist. And although the Bible promotes empathy, forgiveness, and charity, it puts even more emphasis on personal responsibility and free will, and the West, to at least some extent, owes its individualistic roots to the teachings of Christianity. Christopher Dawson, one of the greatest cultural historians, argues that if we study culture as a whole, we shall find that there is an intimate relationship between its religious faith and its social achievement. Dawson also emphasized the role religion played in Western society's scientific advancement. When I was an undergraduate, Christianity was labeled an enemy of science. It was only after many years of reading outside academic orthodoxy that I realized it was the mother of science. The scientific revolution, a time in which most of our modern scientific principles were adopted, was sparked from a group of devout Christians. Most, if not all, of our Western social norms have been in some way influenced by biblical teachings. For example, basic rule of law and natural rights were heavily influenced by post-Enlightenment theologians. The philosophy behind liberalism was founded on the biblical teachings of equality, personal responsibility, and individualism. In Thomas Paine's book, The Rights of Man, he makes the argument that without Christianity, we would have no natural rights. In other words, if we didn't have God, which morality would our rights be based off of? And without religion, where would we base our morality itself? The most essential principle in all of Western culture is that every person has rights that transcend the reach of government. These rights must, therefore, have been endowed by a creator. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution, also known as the Bill of Rights, aimed to protect what we would consider our natural rights. Without that belief in the fundamental equality of rights, the United States of America would not exist as it does today. With that being said, this is not an apologetic argument, but a case for the value that Christianity has historically shown and currently holds, and a demonstration of how that value is being neglected today. The impact Christianity has historically had on the world is undeniable, from transforming the Roman Empire to the Lutheran Reformation. Many people today scoff at religion because they associate it with ignorance. They see it as a betrayal to science and a cult of willful delusion. But most people, including many Christians, fail to see the inherent benefits that religion can yield to both a society and an individual. These include fellowship, belongingness, and most importantly, structure. This is true for many religions in many societies all around the world and throughout time. The ability for any religion, not just Christianity, to change and improve the structure of people's lives for the better is part of what gives it its value. And as a matter of fact, study shows that for prison inmates, religion is one of the most effective forms of rehabilitation. The foundational basis for a lifelong union between a man and a woman, also known as marriage, also stemmed from biblical ideas. This institution is now recognized by the government and offers many statistical advantages. According to the US Census, children with married parents are 30% less likely to grow up in poverty. In addition, children with married parents are much more likely to attend college and have extraordinarily less health problems. Married individuals are far better off financially than unmarried couples and are reportedly much happier. But as stated earlier, marriage, along with Christianity in general, is at a stark decline. Today, only 64% of children live in two-parent homes, compared to 88% in 1960. Christianity certainly isn't to credit for every positive aspect of Western culture, and it without doubt carries consequences. But to have as much of a distaste for religion as we currently do in America is to be either blind or ignorant to the benefits that it carries. As Douglas Winnail puts it, modern atheist critics can scoff at the beliefs of the Bible and the superstitions of professing Christianity, but they do so while benefiting from living in a culture built on many of the beliefs they detest. We are morphing from a culture of discipline, personal responsibility, and self-actualization to one of rebellion, defiance, and self-righteousness. Christianity isn't just a fairy tale. It can act as a moral compass. Religion can provide structure, it can encourage self-improvement, and promote positive values. That is something all people, religious or not, should be able to agree on.